Appreciate you being here today. My name is Andrew Cannon. I'm the Transportation Director for the Hidalgo County Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO as we're also known as. Just as a little matter of housekeeping, we want to make sure you understand that July 18th is input deadline. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns, that's the deadline to get that information into us over at the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council. August 6th will be the final regional meeting. August 21st and 22nd is the deadline for final input, and September 24th, all of this regional plan will be adopted by the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council Board at the Transit Center on South Pleasant View. The Hidalgo County MPO is a federally mandated transportation planning organization that is established in communities with an urbanized area as defined by census with a population of 50,000 or greater. We serve as the conduit to the public about how federal tax dollars are being expended in the way of transportation planning. And we cover all facets of planning short of aviation for Hidalgo County. Transit, sidewalks, hike and bike trails, roadway improvements. We oversee all the transportation planning for those projects. A little bit of what we'll be covering today will be some of our goals that we have as an organization. Also, these goals are established by MAP 21, which is our latest transportation bill. Increase the safety of the transportation system for motorized and non-motorized users. Increase the security of transportation system for motorized and non-motorized users. Increase accessibility for mobility of people and freight. Protect and enhance the environment, promote energy conservation, and emphasize the preservation of the existing transportation system, or trying to make what we have on ground last as long as we possibly can. So a little bit about what we do on the increasing the safety. My staff takes a lot of data. I'm not going to go over these bullet points specifically, but we'll take data. There's a data set that's provided to us by the Texas Department of Transportation called CRIS. That data set is a log that TxDOT keeps of every traffic accident that happens that's registered through DPS. So we get that information in-house, and we will circulate that information through to regurgitate out the information that we need. And what we will do is monitor how frequently accidents are happening at certain corridors, intersections, how many accidents are happening on a per year basis with pedestrians, how many pedestrian accidents if there's a record of it. And of course, unfortunately, pedestrian accidents also include information about cyclists that may be involved in accidents as well. And as everyone's aware, we've had 4 fatalities so far this year in Hidalgo County. So we're hoping to do more in the way of planning and working with our elected officials to do something to address this concern. We do identify and analyze highway safety problems. A lot of that through our congestion studies that we do as well, and try to come up with ways and recommendations to address and to facilitate those safety needs. This information is shared back with the MPO board, and my board is comprised of all of the elected officials in each of the municipalities within Hidalgo County, including Hidalgo County. I have 22 board members that I serve for that board, and we present all of this information that I'm sharing with you today to them for their final decision on it. Part of that is called our incident management plan of what we use the CRIS data for. We're in transition on that to change that over to TIM, which will be the transportation improvement plan. Transportation improvement and mobility, I believe, is what we're going to now. We're going to call that TIM. But we take that data, and it's good because we can go back and analyze. And if we have a frequency of accidents at an intersection, if you will, where a lot of T-bone accidents are happening, we can go back and try to investigate. Maybe the yellow light cues aren't long enough. Maybe the left-hand turn movement, green lights, aren't long enough to allow for traffic to get through the queue in a proper manner before the intersecting light turns green. So we'll look at that data. It's a little harder when we look at pedestrian accidents. Far too often, that data isn't captured by DPS, but the data that is, we try to take that and look at it. Did we have a cyclist, for instance, who was in a bike lane and they were struck? How do we address that? Our most recent fatality we had a cyclist that wasn't in any bike lane, and they don't have to ride in the bike lane. By law, they can take the right foremost part of the lane But how do we do something about that? Unfortunately, in that situation, we had an inebriated driver who hit the young man, and there's very little that we're able to do as a planning organization about drunk driving. We will also work closely with TxDOT on the Click It and Ticket campaigns, and we also work closely with TxDOT when they do their baby seat campaigns that they do as well, because we want to get that information out to young mothers who may have limited incomes about the availability of some baby seats to them and the proper way to facilitate using those baby seats. So when an accident should happen, the little ones aren't injured more so in that accident should they have not been properly restrained in the vehicle. Increase the safety transportation system for motorized and non-motorized. Again, that's what we just went over and we discussed that. And we try to work closely with those organizations. We do have a bike ped task force that meets once a month. As a matter of fact, I believe they're meeting next Monday at UTPA. And a part of the recommendations that come out of that bike ped task force is that's the general public, much like you. That's the people who are using the network. We want to hear from them about their needs, their desires, and we take that to our advisory committee and then to the policy board for final approval. Yes, ma'am?
I personally don't feel there's been enough public education on the bike lane. And to be really honest, when I drive into McAllen and go from McAllen to far to San Juan, sometimes I don't know if that's a bike lane or if it's another lane. And I know I've talked to some friends in Brownsville, there's cyclists who are being hit because they're in a bike lane and someone's making a right-hand turn and they think that's the turning lane. So I would like to see under your strategy maybe to get Channel 4, 5, 8, 23, whatever, to do a program about bike lanes. And how do you know when it's a bike lane and how do you know it's a turning lane? This is a suggestion.
Okay. Something I will address out of that, and I think that's a very excellent question, Ms. Cass. A bike lane, first and foremost, is a shoulder, legally. Always is, always will be. And there's the rule of three when approaching an intersection where there is a bike lane. Police officers, as a rule, won't give you any problems should you be 3 cars back and you're moving over into that shoulder to use it as a right-hand turn lane. That's completely legal to do. Where we run into problems is we now have safe passing ordinances in all of the cities, just about throughout the Lower Rio Grande. And people don't understand that by city ordinance, it's illegal for you to turn right in front of a bicycle or a pedestrian using that shoulder or bicycle lane if they're moving in the same direction as you. You have to legally allow them to pass before you turn right.
That's why I think there needs to be more education.
I agree, and tomorrow morning at the McAllen Chamber of Commerce, bike safety campaign is going to be down here, and they're having a kickoff there as well as McAllen has got a campaign going forth. And in our campaign, I have PSAs on TV with Tim Smith, who's a cyclist, and he's a good friend, and we've been able to get him out and volunteer his time to do some of these PSAs, but I agree that there needs to be more information. There is information on all of this located at our offices at 510 South Pleasant View, as well as also hcmpo.org. Much of our information is there on our website, and all of the literature that we put out on cycling and pedestrian safety is provided in English and Spanish. So that information is available should you like any. Some of the other measures that we're looking at trying to get underway is some of the campaigns that have worked very successfully in Houston and Dallas area, such as the removal of vehicles quickly from the expressway when there's an accident. Far too often we have people who may bump into each other, or even your more severe accidents. There's really no need for a vehicle to sit there for as long as they do often here in the Lower Rio Grande. So we want to facilitate a campaign along with the police department that in non-fatality accidents and non-life-threatening accidents, we're able to get those vehicles cleared off of the expressway immediately, and all the dissemination of information can happen on the frontage road to allow that traffic to continue to flow, because that is a safety concern. Far too often people are texting, not paying attention, traffic is at a stop, they're rear-ending people, illegal passing movements, and I think everybody in the room has seen people illegally exit the expressway through the grass and off of curbs, and this causes damage not only to our grassy areas that we have along the freeway, which serve to prevent against erosion, but causes further traffic damage and possible accidents exiting the freeway that way. And we go back and we look at this information, and now with the new transportation bill that we have to do performance measures. So we'll be placing some of our own measures on ourselves to meet, and hopefully those goals, and we'll be able to exceed those goals or meet those goals, and we have to provide that back to federal highways of how did we do that. So much of this information I'm sharing with you today, we will be establishing goals for as part of our performance measure campaign. Increase accessibility and mobility for people and freight. A lot of what we do in the way of transportation planning, and I'll talk about the freight first, is in cooperation with our bridges and the cities who own the bridges. We want to do what we can to facilitate moving that freight across the bridges in a safe, effective manner and get them out of the valley as quickly as possible. Most of our bridges, this is accomplished pretty easy. FAR presents us with opportunities of improvement on a regular basis, being with the location that they are and no direct accessibility to the expressway. So we want to work on that. Now with the new Ansel Lewis Bridge, it's alleviated a little bit of the pedestrian traffic there because Ansel Lewis cannot carry cargo yet, but not so much at FAR. And we're about to have a great increase because of the Mazatlan Highway that's opening up, or has opened up. Much of the produce that's coming into the United States through New Mexico and Arizona will no longer be going through New Mexico and Arizona. It's quicker for them to bring it here to Texas, and then we're going to be moving it out of Texas. We're expecting anywhere from a 40 to 60% increase in produce movements across the FAR Bridge alone. So we have to find a way to work with our partners, TxDOT, CBP, and Federal Highways. They have inspection facilities out there for everything that comes across on how we can move that goods across effectively. How can we get it on the expressway, and how can we get it out of the valley if they're going north in a reasonable amount of time? We also, some years back, worked on establishing a hazmat, non-radioactive hazardous route. That is in place throughout the county, so we have established that to try to limit the trucks and their movements, so that way we don't have fuel tankers rolling next to schools and something horrible should happen, or next to hospitals or elderly care facilities. So we work closely with our city partners to try to establish those type of networks and get that taken care of. We also work very closely on the pedestrian side of things with our cities to try to identify and promote when grants are available for things as, like right now, TxDOT is going through a campaign, and so is the city of FAR, for curb cuts. Those cuts that facilitate ramps, so those individuals who are wheelchair bound or in motorized little devices to get from A to B, can facilitate sidewalks easier, can facilitate getting cross-street movements in a safer manner. And it's also mandated by federal regs that we have that for ADA compliance. But we work very closely to try to do that. Also to try, and we work with our transit providers as well, because we want to be sure that bus shelters that are provided are in an area where those individuals that may be reliant upon those type of movements with wheelchairs or motorized apparatuses can facilitate to the bus stop and then onto the bus in a safe manner. So it's a very intricate network that we do, working with the cities and with the transit providers to try to make sure that everybody can get from the A to B regardless of their mobility capabilities. No questions on that one? That was easy. Emphasize the preservation of the existing transportation system. This comes to funding for us, almost 100%. The amount of federal funds that have come down to the Lower Rio Grande for transportation enhancements, added capacity, and projects has been cut drastically. Our vehicle gas tax hasn't gone up in 20 years. No one's willing to take a stance on it either at the state level or at the federal level yet. I'm hoping that on the new federal bill they'll raise gas tax 10 cents. Please don't throw anything at me. I'm hoping for a 10-cent gas tax increase, because the problem that we have, and most people don't think about it, and most of you probably already have, as CAFE standards on vehicles improve and we continue to get cars that can do 40, 50, 60, 200 miles per gallon, which we have on some vehicles with the Lotus vehicles that are out there, that mileage is going up, which means trips at the gas pump are going down. You're still using the roadways just as much as you were before, but now you're making less frequent stops at the gas pump. Therefore, we're getting less dollars that we were from the federal and state government to be able to go towards those transportation type infrastructure projects that we much need for the same amount of vehicles that are still using the roadway. So there has to be something worked out about this. One of the ways that we try to do to save costs, since we're limited on funding, is through preserving the infrastructure that we have in place, whether we're talking about concrete or we're talking about grass. And the reason I say grass is because we work very closely with our municipalities to preserve right-of-way. When we know that there's going to be a roadway possible expansion in area X, we work with them as part of our thoroughfare plan to preserve that right-of-way, so that right-of-way doesn't get purchased up in the future by a big box developer or someone wanting to do a home development, so it makes that property much more expensive in the future to buy. So we work closely to try to preserve that now. We try to work closely with wanting to promote multimodalism more, to get people to take buses more. You can get a lot further on your dollar on a bus than you can through a vehicle, with gas prices being at $3.40 a gallon. Sometimes this doesn't work so well because, unfortunately, here in the valley we seem to have more of a mindset that mass transit is really for the poorer population. And that's not true. Mass transit is an awesome tool. It works really well in other communities. I am a huge fan when I travel to the East Coast and to the Northeast of mass transit. I go to DC, I never take a car. I use the bus system there, or the metro system, which is their subway system that they have. Same thing in Philadelphia. Austin, I love taking the buses in Austin. It's so nice to be able to drive to Austin Park and not have to do that. So we want to promote and work with our transit providers at McAllen and also with Valley Metro to be able to get people to understand that mindset and get them to do that. Car share programs or share riding programs to get people to carpool to work more often. People are going to similar areas and home from different similar areas, to promote that more and to share that. Less vehicles on the roadway. Less vehicles on the roadway, less impact upon the infrastructure that we have, less need to be able to have to go back in a couple of years and repair that infrastructure. So we try to promote that through our organization as well. We try to keep a log in our office, it's called a pavement management system, of when pavement is put down. We keep a log of the age of the network. And that sort of helps us so that maybe when we start looking at projects in the future to fund, how old is that network really? Because we want to be sure that we don't go down and gnaw up pavement that was just put down a couple of years ago to do further expansion. Or if we have an expansion project on the horizon, we want to make sure that we're not going down and doing overlay work on that and expending that money for additional pavement when we know that the work is going to be done. A good example of that would be Dove or Owassa. That project, I know a lot of people hated potholes on it and everything for the longest time, but they really didn't facilitate going down and putting down a great amount of pavement on there. When we have it, it's going to let in the next couple of years, and it's going to be widening out the 5 lanes. So I know they've done some overlay work, and it was really needed in front of the RV park because we have a lot of egress and regress on that RV park with our winter Texans. But other than that, what we have is what we have until we do a full added capacity project for Owassa. And we try to evaluate the connectivity between the different modes, and that goes back to pedestrian modes. How can we make sure that we're getting people from A to B regardless of the mode of transportation that they're wanting to choose? For me, an example of that is UTPA or STC, or even here at NAP. If we have people who want to be able to take a bike from A to B, all of our transit providers now, I think on every bus that they have bike racks on the front of them. So it does facilitate for individuals to be able to go take a mode of their choice, a bicycle, to a bus stop, get on a bus, and then take that bike to work with them or over to UTPA or STC. And it helps promote that, or we try to help promote that more, again, to alleviate additional vehicles on the roadway system. A lot of the implementation process for what we do is taking so much of this information that we have and presenting it to our advisory committee, which meets monthly, and taking the recommendations that come out of the advisory committee, which is comprised mostly of staff of the municipalities that we work with, city engineers, city planners, also representation from our commuter rail district, our RMA here in Hidalgo County. and trying to work with them to see what the needs and the demands are, and then present that to our decision makers, the elected officials at our policy board meeting, and try to do the best implementation of these projects that we can. It has become more of a challenge with limited funds that we're facing. We're hoping that after Proposition 1 is voted on in November, that some of that will be alleviated, and Proposition 1 is a constitutional amendment which would pump in about $1.2 to $1.6 billion annually into transportation out of the rainy day fund. It's not actually out of the rainy day fund. The rainy day fund is going to be capped, and any additional funds that come in would be that $1.2 billion shifted over to transportation. That's important, and we want to get the word out to the public about that, because it's no new taxes. There's not a single new tax dollar tied to this constitutional amendment, and the money cannot go for toll roads. And I know that's a big concern that people have had about public tax dollars going to toll roads and then you having to pay toll to be able to use that facility. And that's not true. So we're hoping with some education between now and November, after Proposition 1 passes, we'll have some additional money to the Lower Rio Grande area to be able to facilitate more of these projects that we need and make up for some of our shortfall. Just met with TxDOT executives yesterday, and it looks very promising. We're still waiting to see a formula distribution for us and for all of the MPOs around the state. There's 25, to see exactly, or have an idea of what it is that we may be looking at. I'm guessing it's somewhere in the ballpark at around $32 to $35 million annually. And the good thing about this is it's only good for 2 years. It would take the legislation every even number year when they come back in to take action upon that for that to be reinitialized. So I think that's a good catch-all for that, to make sure that it's being used properly. That's not mine. I feel like I skipped one. I apologize. I do want to touch upon that with the beginning of hurricane season having just began on the 1st. We do work with our planning partners to try to make sure that we can do the best that we can on moving people out of the Hidalgo County area should there be an emergency arise to do so. We have a challenge here. Far too often, the valley being what the valley is unique than most other areas, that now we have an interstate system, but we only have two. One east-west and one north-south for us. And then there's 77, of course, or I-69 east as well. It's important that we work with these decision makers, because even if we do contraflow lanes, which is traffic driving in the same direction on both sides of the freeway, we have an interchange that's only one lane. Or if you contraflow, it's two. So we have 6 lanes going to 2. So it's important to work with these people, and we also work very closely with our transit providers, who the last time we had a scare did a remarkable job of being able to provide buses to get the elderly moved, to get people out, children out of the area and get them moved up north. So that way, at least that was a least impactful situation on the elderly who may be in elderly care. So we try to work closely with them as to what their needs are, what can they provide, and orchestrate all this. And a lot of that is all done through the Lower Rio Grande with their organization to facilitate these needs, and in many of the emergency operations centers that we have throughout the area. I know I go to the one in McAllen when we have something come up, and we were there last time. So it's important to be able to work with all of our partners on this. With that being said, I don't have any additional bullet points, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that there may be on anything.
How closely do you work with the other NGOs in Cameron County?
I don't. We are.
This is a regional plan. I'm not quite sure I understand why this is just Hidalgo County.
I would answer that by saying that the Lower Rio Grande is the administrative agent for the Hidalgo County MPO, and Harlingen, San Benito, and Brownsville MPOs are both departments of their cities. So now, with that being said, we are working again to facilitate discussions Senator Lucio has made several comments about his need and desire to want to have all three MPOs merged into one. Representative Martinez has equally shown that desire. We have had some meetings. TxDOT wants it, but it has to be decided at the local level by the officials at the board. And we did find out some interesting information on verbiage yesterday from the new transportation bill, where right now with the wording of it, they're allowing one MPO per Metropolitan Statistical Area, or MSA. We have two MSAs, Hidalgo County and Cameron County. If that prevails to be true, then it would force the hand of Cameron County to be one MPO. But there's also some other additional language in there, such as additional funding for MPOs above 1 million. We would only breach that by being one MPO between the three areas, because our area is greater than 800,000 in population alone. With Brownsville being over the 200,000 mark, we facilitate the 1 million mark and that additional funding. So that's something we just learned yesterday, so we're hoping to bring that to the table when talking to the elected officials about the need or the desire. It's just a challenge, because being one region but also so spread out, our communities are far too often siloed, and everybody wants to be sure that the best interest of their area is taken care of first. And I don't blame anybody for that. We just need to take a regional approach to it, to Austin and to the feds, and then we can come back and work that out at one common table on what the independent needs for the areas are. So I hope to see that change soon. I'm hoping, but I've been hoping 10 years, so I could be wrong. Anything else? Well, then with that, I say thank you.